I'm, I'm going to share my slides. So, first of all, I would like to say thank you to everyone for choosing to come and have fun on Friday night. So the title of my talk is a bit of a mouthful, but basically I'm going to talk to you today about literacy materials, community initiatives for literacy material design, and I'm going to try to make a connection between that and institutional support for vernacular education. And I'm going to present this based on my experience with the Ahamb language, which is spoken in Vanuatu. So first of all, a little bit about the Ahamb language. It's spoken in Vanuatu, which is an island nation in the South Pacific. Malekula is the second largest island in Vanuatu. There are about 30 languages spoken on Malekula, and Ahamb is spoken on this small offshore island off the south coast of Malekula. It's an Austronesian Oceanic language. There are around 950 speakers, and it's an endangered language. And the evidence that I'm going to present to you today is based on data that I've collected during my fieldwork on Ahamb in 2017 and 2018 as part of the Ahamb language documentation project, whose primary purposes were to document and describe the language, which had not been described before. So this is a map of Southeast Malekula. This is the tiny Ahamb island where 2/3 of the population live. And since the year 2000 exactly, people have started moving to the mainland here for various reasons, including climate change. And these red villages here are small settlements where Ahamb speakers have settled. So now they live among speakers of other languages, especially in these two large villages of Farun and Okai here. So Ahamb Island has a primary school and a kindergarten. So most Ahamb-speaking children attend these institutions, but some of the ones that live close to these other villages actually attend primary school and kindergarten there. So as I said, today I'm going to first talk about vernacular education in Vanuatu in general, and institutional support and community support for vernacular education, both in Vanuatu and in Ahamb specifically. And I'm going to present to you what literacy materials exist for the Ahamb language, or the literacy materials that are used in the primary school and kindergarten there. And I'm going to talk about the community initiatives for creating new literacy materials. And I'm going to try to make a connection between these things, and primarily between the institutional support and the community initiatives. So Vanuatu has a very complex linguistic situation. There are at least 120 vernacular languages spoken in Vanuatu, over a population of less than 300,000, which makes it the country with most languages per capita. In the constitution of Vanuatu, Bislama, which is a dialect of Melanesian Creole, is defined as the national language of Vanuatu. The official languages are Bislama, English, and French, but the principal languages of education are English and French. That is what is defined in the constitution. But the constitution goes on to provide protection for the different local languages, the indigenous languages, which are part of the national heritage. Those of you who might have had any experience with Vanuatu probably know what custom means. Ni Vanuatu people are very proud of their Melanesian heritage, and indigenous languages are seen as a vehicle for this heritage, and the constitution reflects that. So until 2012, in line with the constitution, instruction in schools was only in English or French. But in 2012, a new document was published, the Vanuatu National Language Policy, which provides for instruction in vernacular languages, including Bislama, in the first 3 years of primary school. Now, Bislama it needs to be mentioned that Bislama is the first language of many children and youth, especially those who live in urban areas. Now, with time, the government provided resources for education, including both literacy materials and training for teachers, for 60 vernacular languages. That's around half of the existing languages. And the criterion for choosing these 60 languages was the number of speakers. So languages with 1,000 speakers or more were supported, and languages like Ahamb, who had fewer speakers, were not supported. And in those communities, the government provided literacy materials and other support for instruction in Bislama instead. Now, this new policy was promoted by the government, and more specifically by the Curriculum Development Unit at the Ministry of Education. And in 2018, I was lucky enough to attend a conference in Vanuatu where a person from the Curriculum Development Unit, James Melteris, gave a very nice talk presenting the evidence for this new policy. So he stressed on the importance of literacy development in a child's first language, which we all know about. He presented experience from other countries, including Cameroon, Nigeria, and Tonga. And he presented neuroscientific evidence, which was very nice. And he very kindly provided the slides for his talk, and I presented it before the Ahamb community. We managed to find a projector, and I tried to show the community why it's so important to introduce vernacular education. However, the whole policy was received in a very mixed way on the national level, for example. And here I've prepared 4 examples of these. These are all publications in the media. So here is one that, for example, says that the new language policy is littered with Bislama as an alternative to local vernaculars. So here Bislama and the vernaculars are put in opposition to each other. Bislama is called a half-caste language, which is not anybody's mother tongue, which is clearly a misunderstanding because it is. In this second one, a very well-respected educationist in Vanuatu. He was one of the first people to work within education when Vanuatu became an independent country in 1980. Amon Cuero. This is just very recently, he says that it would be disastrous to the children's learning process in the long run because Bislama and local languages have no formal structures. Here is another one from a concerned citizen who says that many students are facing tougher challenges in writing, reading, spelling, and proper English due to introducing Bislama. Unlike English, Bislama has no structure and no rules and creates clouds of confusion. And this last one is actually not an opinion by a concerned citizen or someone else. This is actually a parliamentary committee on human resources and capital. And in their report, they say that the teaching of Bislama can contribute to the deterioration of the quality of English and French taught in school. We need to drop Bislama and concentrate on improving the quality of English and French. So here, the emphasis is on English and French, not like in the first one where Bislama and the vernaculars are put in opposition. The use of Bislama teaching must be reviewed and should be done away with. This is a quote by the head of this committee, who actually happens to be the member of parliament from the Ahamb community. Now, these were the attitudes on the national level and the government level. within Ahamb speakers, the attitudes are also, among Ahamb speakers, the attitudes are also mixed. So there's generally very positive attitude towards maintaining the vitality of Ahamb. As I said, people see it as a vehicle for their customs and traditions and their Melanesian heritage. So in 2017, I interviewed quite a few people from the community, which resulted in a language context paper that was later published. And I particularly like this quote here by a speaker who said that if we want to catch up on education, we need to use the Ahamb language. English is difficult and children don't learn it properly because they teach simple English in school. So this speaker intuitively understood that literacy should first be taught in a child's home language. Now, in contrast with that, there is a general perception that the oldest living generation comprises the real speakers of the language. And this means that many younger speakers, including most of the teachers in the school who are under 30, lack confidence in their language skills. Now, within the community, there is a very limited enthusiasm for using Ahamb in the church. When I was doing my fieldwork, I asked a few times if people wanted to have a church service in Ahamb that I could record. We did eventually, but the reason for this is always the same. It is because they don't want to alienate from the church the few community members who don't speak Ahamb. These are usually women from other places who marry into the community. And also during church services, there are very often guests from other Presbyterian parishes around Vanuatu. And as I mentioned, literacy in Bislama and English or French is viewed as the key to paid employment and career development, especially by the island's social elite that actually comprises some of the teachers, community, most of the community leaders, church leaders, and so on. So now I'm going to talk to you about the literacy materials that are used in primary schools and that have been proposed for Ahamb. So at the moment in the primary school, all the literacy materials that are used are readers in Bislama that have been provided by the government. Now, as part of the Ahamb language documentation project, I proposed a number of literacy materials to the community, and together with the community, in very close cooperation with the community, we developed some of them, and most of them have been delivered, at least in a draft format. I was supposed to go there this year and deliver the rest of them, but it's impossible to travel at the moment. So these included translations of those Bislama readers, stories told by community members that in writing, a word list, translations of posters that were hanging already in the classrooms on the walls that the community had come up with themselves. These included instructions for making lemonade or lap-lap, which is the local food, and also some materials that my colleagues at the University of Waikato had developed for other molecular languages that we adapted for Ahamb, including picture dictionaries, an alphabet poster, and a calendar. And here are some examples. This is, for example, the translation of one primary school book that was in Bislama and we translated in Ahamb. This is a picture dictionary and this is more of it. These are some descriptions of activities that, these are the materials that my colleagues had developed and we also translated into Ahamb. This is part of the alphabet poster, for example. So when this lady, her name is Anna, and she is the longest serving kindergarten teacher on Ahamb. When she saw these materials, she was extremely excited. And she said, okay, can I have some of these, the simpler ones to use in the kindergarten? And then one day she came to me and she said, okay, I want other things. And she had made a list and she said, I want booklets with numbers. I want to teach numeracy in Ahamb, colors, shapes. She had come up with different ideas. we sat down and we wrote down short indigenous poems that they recited for the kids, and they wanted in writing. And also she organized a few women from the community to come and be recorded telling children's stories, and she asked for recordings of these stories so they can play them for the children. Now, this is, for example, one of the booklets with shapes. So it says, what is this? This is a triangle, and so on. Who is this? This is my grandmother. This is my grandfather. So what were the teachers' attitudes? You probably get an idea by now, but on the primary school level, there was very little enthusiasm for teaching Ahamb or in Ahamb. And the teachers basically said that they needed training and endorsement by the government. They couldn't make the decision themselves. They receive salaries. They're subject to a very strict institutional hierarchy. They knew that teachers from other communities had been through training. They had received literacy materials in their respective vernacular languages, and they didn't want to make the decision. They cooperated, but the enthusiasm was not really there. Whereas the kindergarten teachers, as I said, were very enthusiastic. And I need to make it clear here that kindergartens in Vanuatu in general are, to a large extent, community initiatives. For example, the kindergarten building on Ahamb was built by the community. There was a fundraising campaign, and people worked together for free to make the building a very beautiful building. Then there was another fundraising campaign for solar panels, for example. And actually these efforts are mostly voluntary. So the teachers were volunteers. I think the community sometimes collected food or money for them. It's a bit more like private daycare. But since recently they do receive salaries. Also I need to make it clear that kindergarten education is actually regulated by the government. So in 2012, following the national language policy, there was another document that came out, the National Curriculum for Kindergarten. And in line with the national language policy, it said that it's imperative that children are educated in their home language through the kindergarten program. So here we see an interesting combination of a removal of the top level institutional barriers to using Ahamb on the kindergarten level. At the same time, local attitudes that the teachers in the community probably don't perceive this as a necessity for having an endorsement by the government to actually use the vernacular on the preschool level. So to summarize, the Ahamb language is not yet used in primary education. There is a certain lack of support and endorsement by the state. There is little enthusiasm among primary school teachers, and there is mixed institutional and community attitudes. In contrast, there is enthusiasm on the preschool level. There's a perceived lack of necessity for institutional endorsement on the preschool level and training. I think it is obvious to make a connection here between the institutional support and the community attitudes, which probably go hand in hand to a certain extent, and the unlikeliness of Ahamb finding its place in formal primary education until there is better institutional endorsement. I have to thank my collaborators from the Ahamb community and the whole community for taking very good care of me and for treating me with kindness and supporting the whole project. And I have to thank the Endangered Languages Documentation Program for providing the funding for the whole project. These are some references, and I'll be happy to answer some questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tihomir. That was an amazing and super interesting talk. So I particularly enjoyed the attitudes. So the rest of you do write questions in the chat. I'll ask in the meantime just a couple of questions to get us going. So yes, the attitudes, that was interesting. And also seeing this Enna Mark, the one specific lady that you mentioned who was so passionate and wanted more materials. It was amazing. My first question, while we're waiting other people to post their questions, is were these materials used on the island or in the communities on the bigger island where they'd moved?
They were used on the island. So basically how it works is that the kindergarten and primary school are on the island. The communities that live on the mainland, they live there since recently, and most of them retain the connection with the island. So usually if they have children on the primary school level or the kindergarten level, very often these children stay with their grandmothers or aunties or so on the island. But I know that the villages that are very close to those non-Ahamb speaking villages, they send their children to kindergarten and primary school in these non-Ahamb speaking places. Yes.
Okay. We have a question about the neuroscience and mother tongue education. Do you want to elaborate on that, DeAndre, or? Seems like a very generic question. In the meantime, Christina, do you want to pose your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, it's very quiet, but I think we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry for asking so many questions.
It's good. It's good.
Okay. I was wondering if I understood correctly that the primary school teachers, do they use the Bislama materials? Are they more enthusiastic about those? And if so, why?
Well, they do use the Bislama materials because these are the materials provided by the government. The government has instructed them to teach in Bislama, and they have undergone training in 2012 when the policy changed, because they were teaching in English. You know, these children had never spoken English in their lives, and then they would go to first year of primary school, and then they would start learning in English. And then this was changed, so now they learn in Bislama. And, you know, I don't know if the teachers were very enthusiastic about teaching in Bislama, but the point in my talk was that they were not very enthusiastic about changing from Bislama to the vernacular. I hope this answers your question.
Yes, I have one follow-up, but I'm happy to wait for others to ask their questions
first.
first.
Oh, go ahead, Christine.
The reason why I came up with this question was, thank you. Could it be that the materials could be changed in a way that they would accept them more easily? So if they were involved in the production, like the kindergarten teachers, or in the choice of pictures, something like that, I noticed that there are many pictures of white people, for example.
Yes, that's true. They were involved in the materials. They helped with the translations, for example. Other community members did. For example, some of the primary school readers in Bislama, I translated together with some older speakers because they simply have more time. And then I would go and edit them with the primary school teachers, because they would say, oh, this is too difficult language, you know. So they changed them in a way that would suit them better. But their lack of enthusiasm is mostly because of the lack of institutional support, and because, as I mentioned, some of these teachers are actually part of the elite, and I know that the social elite of the island are actually support Bislama in general more than Ahamb. And also, as I mentioned in those articles from the newspapers, it turned out, I was very surprised to learn that the member of parliament from Ahamb is actually against vernacular education. He's actually against Bislama education as well. And, you know, I've never been there to hear him discuss with the community, but I can imagine that he has. And he's someone who is very well respected, and you know, his word against mine is, you know, yeah, that's I think what
That's great.
Thank
I
you.
think Deandre may have meant your references, so could you show that list again? I'm not entirely sure, but just in case.
okay, I'll share screen. These are my references.
I'm not sure. I may be, otherwise the rest of you can.
Otherwise, someone asked about the neuroscience
Yeah,
thing.
maybe you know, maybe it wasn't the references. Yes, do answer the neuroscience question.
These were not my slides, and I have them somewhere, and if we have time I can dig them out and see what exactly they said. But actually there is evidence about, with, you know, literacy development and neuroscience and brain development and so on. So they use that kind of evidence to support, to say why it's important for children to learn how to read and write first in their vernacular, in their home language, and then it's easy for them to go on and learn to read and write in other languages, as all of us here probably know.
Okay, I got it. Yes, you mentioned it in passing. I just got confused. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, I wrote, this kind of relates to what Christina asked about the Bislama materials. So they are culturally appropriate, but it's just that they're in a different language. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Actually, the ones that you are probably referring to, the ones with the family, the grandmother and the grandfather, these are just drafts because I made them at Waikato.
Oh, that's the Ahamb materials, but I'm thinking the Bislama materials that they're forced to use.
Oh
or
no,
have
they are
to get to use. I'm sorry.
They are culturally appropriate, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They are drawn in Vanuatu, they were written, and yes, and most of them, many of them are stories, like traditional stories from different islands in different places.
Okay.
And they have to do with earthquakes and islands and tsunamis. And
okay, so that aspect sounds good. It's just that they're in a different language from what they used. And what are you going to do next? If you can't travel, how can you continue supporting the community? Or what if you could travel? What would you do?
At the moment, we have a Facebook group page, or whatever it's called, like a closed page where I post things. And some people who have access to the internet and use Facebook regularly use it. Actually, the ones who mostly use it are ironically the ones who live in the cities, who actually have less access to Ahamb, which is actually probably good for them. And maybe when they go back, they can talk about this. I think I have arranged, because I've left New Zealand, which is close to Vanuatu, but I've arranged with my colleagues in New Zealand when I'm more ready with some final versions of these literacy materials, to organize one, to send them to them. They'll print them and send a larger shipment to Vanuatu. Although my experience is that when you go there and present the materials and tell them how they're supposed to be used and so on, they will be used better, because otherwise, if I just send them there in an envelope, there is a big chance that they will just end up in a drawer somewhere and wait for me to show up at some point. But I'm finishing my PhD at the moment, and I'm actually hoping to get another job that will involve going back to Vanuatu. So I feel very well involved with this community. So
yes, it sounds very good.
Even if I don't work in Vanuatu, I'll probably go back to visit at some point, I've been adopted and so on.
That's great. And what you said about like going there in person and showing them, that relates to the COVID materials in South Africa and Namibia talk we had the other day, because there was the same, like if you actually go there and demonstrate and talk in person, that works very, very well. I believe.
I would like to say that giving the benefit of the MP from Ahamb, that after I saw this article in the newspaper, he actually once invited me when I was in the capital to his home, and we had a very, very long talk about how important literacy education, vernacular education is. And I actually sent him the slides by James to try to persuade him that this is important. So I hope I have managed to change his mind.
Okay. Is he still fluent? Like, is he speaks
yes,
it still? Yeah.
He's definitely fluent.
Great. Thank you so much, Tihomir. That was an excellent talk and I learned so much. And the next speaker is, I'd like to say Iris, but is it Iris? Orosia Campos Bandrés from the University of Zaragoza. And you're going to tell us about the current achievements and challenges in the teaching of the Aragonese language. Is it possible to create new speakers? And I believe, Iris, you had a pre-recorded presentation, is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I have a pre-recorded presentation. Good evening. My name is Orosia Campos Bandrés, and I belong to the University of Zaragoza in the region of Aragon in Spain. And in my case, I am going to present my communication through a recorded presentation because my level of English is not the best. So I apologize in advance for it, and I will try my best if you have any questions after the presentation. And before the beginning, I would like to also to thank Lily and Riitta for their kind help and their kind consideration. So let's go there. Yeah. Good evening. My name is Iris Campos and I come from the University of Zaragoza in Spain. Before the starting of my presentation, I would like to apologize of my English because it's been a long time since I last spoke English, so I will try my best. In the introduction of my presentation, I will start by explaining the current situation of Aragonese language, and I will focus on its introduction into schools in 1997. After, I will present a research done with children who are not traditional speakers of Aragonese. Aragonese is a unique minority language spoken in Aragon, a territory located in the northeastern part of Spain. In the eastern area of Aragon is also spoken Catalan as a minority language too. Aragon is a very large territory, but population is mostly located in Zaragoza province because of the centralization of resources in the capital. Aragonese is a Romanic language that in these days is only spoken as a traditional tongue in some rural areas located in the province of Huesca. As we can see in this map, its ethno-linguistic vitality is variable. Aragonese was spoken in a large area of the province until 1950, but nowadays there is a relative degree of social bilingualism only in two areas located in the north. It is also important to note that nowadays this language is under level 2 in the Atlas of the World's Languages in Danger. Nevertheless, it is important to underline that there are also some new speakers in towns like Huesca and Zaragoza, the capital of Aragon. The new speakers movement was born in the 70s, and nowadays we can say that almost the half of speakers of Aragonese are located in the capital, Zaragoza. However, linguistic rights in education are only partially guaranteed in Huesca province, and children in Zaragoza have no chance to learn Aragonese at school. In short, we can say that although the number of speakers has grown in the last decades, nowadays Aragonese is still at risk of disappearing in a short period of time. In the legal field, we can say that linguistic rights for Aragonese speakers have been only partially obtained. Aragonese language was formally recognized as a regional language of Aragon by authorities in 1999, but the first regional law for its protection and promotion was approved in 2009. But with the change of Aragonese government in 2011, turning ideologically from left to right, that law was removed and changed by another one. The aim of the new government was the denial of the existence of Aragonese and Catalan in Aragon, so the first thing they did was to deny even their names. In 2015, there was a new political change of Aragonese government. Since then, there is a general direction of linguistic policy in Aragon and great advances have been made, such as the adaptation of the European Framework of Languages for the certification of knowledge in Aragonese. This new institution is also trying to solve the problem with the standardization of Aragonese by creating an official Academy of Languages in Aragon. This new institution has also started some projects related to technologies such as an online dictionary or an online translator. It has also promoted the creation of resources to make Aragonese known in the territories of Aragon where it is not a native language. Thus, in the last 5 years, the General Direction of Linguistic Policy has promoted different cultural events like exhibitions or concerts. And Aragonese has also got a small place on regional television once a week. Nevertheless, and summarizing, we can say that up to now, Aragonese government attitude has been that Aragonese language is not a right but a folkloric object of Aragonese culture. Thus, Aragonese is a language that has some protection and promotion mostly in its historical territory, mainly in the north, in Huesca province, but does not have the status of a co-official language. Focusing on the situation of Aragonese at school, we can start by saying that when Franco's dictatorship finished, some Spanish regional languages were protected by the new regional governments and were also introduced in schools under bilingual programs. But in the case of Aragonese, things were different. Teaching of Aragonese as a subject started in 1997. It started slowly, only in 4 schools where Aragonese was taught as an extra school activity. It is also important to point out that since 2007, Aragonese can be introduced in the school timetable as a language of instruction. Nevertheless, it can be said that this right has been only on paper, because parents or students of all territory of Huesca province cannot decide it. Thus, Aragonese can be introduced as a subject and even as a language of instruction only in schools where the school board asks for it. Nowadays, Aragonese is taught in almost 50 schools in Huesca province, and it is mainly taught as a subject 1 or 2 hours per week, except in the 7 schools where it is used as a medium of instruction in other subjects. It is also important to underline the precarious conditions for Aragonese teachers. For instance, they cannot obtain a permanent contract because Aragonese is not a co-official language. This leads to a situation of job dissatisfaction, as we have seen in previous studies. Taking into account this situation, we did a qualitative research focused on the results of the most widespread model for the teaching of Aragonese, as an optional subject in territories where it is not the children's native language. Our main objective was exploring if this model can help to create new speakers. The research was done under a study of learning diaries, and it was focused on the children's representations of Aragonese language, the students' assessment of the different didactic proposals, and the degree of communicative competence in Aragonese shown in the texts written. The participants were 32 students of Aragonese between 10 and 12 who were learning it as an optional subject in 11 different schools and who didn't have any contact with this language out of the school. They wrote their diaries during one school year, and they did it always at home, never at school. Our interest was that their classmates or the teacher did not influence them. We took the data by using an instrument which contains 4 main questions to answer after each Aragonese lesson and other random questions to obtain more data about children's representations. The main questions were: what have we done today? What have I learned and what is its usefulness? What did I like most in this lesson and why? What did I like the least and why? And this is an example of other questions we included in the diaries to get more information. We obtained a total of 875 written entries and 52 drawings. Data were treated using descriptive statistics and category analysis. The first objective was to explore the children's representations of Aragonese language. Regarding our first aim, at first, the results show the majority presence of an integrative motivation in learning Aragonese, like we can see in these examples. In the first one, the student says that the things he has learned in today's lesson are useful to communicate with people who speak in Aragonese. In the second one, the student reflects on speaking Aragonese and going to places where it is spoken and talk with others. Moreover, we find the repeated presence of an affective factor. Children consider themselves heirs to the Aragonese language. In their reflections, there is a recurring allusion to their ancestors and the need to save the language. In this example, the student says that he would like that Aragonese was not in danger and that more people would speak it. Finally, we find some recurring stereotypes in the case of minority languages, such as the identification of Aragonese with folklore and with life in the rural context. All this shows a diglossic vision of the language. For instance, in this example, the student says, "When I think of Aragonese, this is the image that comes to my mind. I see the flag of Aragon, people singing jotas, my grandparents talking, the Aragonese mountains, the cattle, Aragonese villages." The second objective was to explore the students' assessment of the different didactic proposals. In relation to the didactic proposals, we find a preference for tasks related to crafts, and oral communication, such as listening to stories and legends, dramatizing or making short movies. The children also underlined the good atmosphere in the Aragonese class as what they liked the most in the lesson. It is also important to note that most of the answers to the question about what they liked the least indicate that there is nothing they didn't like. There are also a good number of responses that indicate that children don't like things related to the conditions in which Aragonese is taught. For example, one student says, "I don't like that we have very little time to take the Aragonese lesson." And another student says, "I don't like that the lesson is too short and I don't like that it ends." And another student says, "I liked everything because Aragonese is very cool." Other answers are these. For instance, one student says, "There is nothing I didn't like because we have had a good atmosphere in class and we have felt very comfortable." Another student says, "I don't like that in the class that is next to ours, there are people making music and they make a lot of noise." And other student says, "I don't like that there are people who come into our class and bother us." It is very important to remember that these situations that children underline are a consequence of the status that Aragonese has in their schools as an after-school activity. The third objective was to analyze the degree of competence in Aragonese shown in the diaries. Regarding the use of Aragonese in the diaries, we only found one where all the entries are written in this language. In addition, as can be seen, 3 of the diaries present percentages close to 50%. As for the rest, almost all of them contain less than a quarter of the entries with samples of Aragonese. Anyway, the use of Aragonese is mostly based in the use of vocabulary and some simple sentences. It is also important to note that the diaries with most entries in Aragonese were those written by children who took lessons in schools where the Aragonese teachers had more experience and job stability. Other factors linked to a greater presence of Aragonese are the number of students in the group and the time the lessons are taken. The data show the existence of an integrative motivation towards learning Aragonese among children who are not native speakers. This situation is linked to the latency of Aragonese that exists in all the province of Huesca. Thus, children who take Aragonese lessons link the language with their ancestors. The presence of these affective factors makes them to develop an awareness of the importance of saving this minority language. However, the diglossic vision of the language is also evident. Categories such as the past, old age, rural context, and folklore emerge in representations of children. This fact is also found in the case of other minority languages in Spain, such as Asturian, because of the few references of the minority language speaker in the child's daily environment, as well as the institutional and cultural settings. Regarding the communicative competence of children, we can say that the results are consistent with our previous research. Thus, we cannot conclude that they reach a level of A1 or A2 on the European Framework for Languages. However, issues such as teacher stability and experience seem to guarantee better results. In short, we can say that children who study Aragonese but are not native speakers show a great motivation in learning this language whose origin is affective. They also value the teaching of this language very positively and request greater exposure to the language in school. Nevertheless, we cannot say that the most implemented teaching model guarantees the survival of the language, because most of the children do not show the ability to express even simple sentences in Aragonese. And also, they have a diglossic vision of the language. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Iris. It was a fantastic talk, and the audio worked. It was great. I found please post questions in the chat, either in English or Spanish, I guess, goes well as well. I like the positive attitudes. That was, I wrote some notes here. So the attitudes were so positive in schools. And I also liked your research tool, that it was sort of qualitative and you collected a lot of comments. So that was really great on your data analysis. There's a lot of written comments, nearly 495, or it was a lot of, maybe I remember wrong. My question is, in the meantime, I'll wait for the others to come up with theirs. Do you know the parents' attitudes to Aragonese, these children's parents' attitudes?
The parent attitudes are very different in the different families. We find families that are speakers of Euskera, Basque language, and also Catalan language. And they are the main parents that want the children to go to Aragonese classes. In the north of the province of Huesca, where Aragonese is spoken and is taught, there are a lot of people that comes from Catalonia and also from Basque Country, and the most of the children that are learning Aragonese, children who are not native speakers, children who learn it but are not native speakers, are from these kind of families who speak another languages. So I think that there are a sort of solidarity attitude between people who speak other minority languages in Spain.
That makes total sense, that they would then be supportive of Aragonese. I'll just keep asking questions. I wrote down many, but the others. Oh, here's Christina. Good. So, do you want to pose your question?
Me again. Sorry. Just because no one else was typing in question. I was wondering. I didn't quite get the instructions for the diaries. Were they in Spanish or in Aragonese, or weren't there any words?
They were they were bilingual. They were in Spanish or also in Aragonese.
Okay, so they wouldn't have, sorry.
Yes, but they wrote in the language that they want. They didn't have any instruction about the language that they have to use in their diaries.
Okay, thank you.
My next question is, so this is positive sort of for identity, but you're saying that they don't learn that much Aragonese. What are the teaching materials like, or is it more improvised speaking?
About the teaching materials, we find different didactic proposals. There are some proposals that are made by different editorials, but teachers prefer to do their own materials. And we find two two views among teachers in their proposals. There are some teachers that use legends, literature, and references to all lifestyle in the Pyrenean mountains. And there are other teachers that are trying to use Aragonese in order to communicate anything about the real life, the current life of children. So there are two very different views among teachers about the use of the language. There are teachers that have a diglossic view of the language, and there are some teachers that are trying to develop a view more communicative.
Yeah, that's interesting. So two very different skills, and none of them like grammar. They liked the classes, but grammar was not so interesting. Okay.
They don't like grammar, no.
No.
Oral communication, and among the teachers that are using communicative methods, they are trying to do cinema in Aragonese, or they are trying to do YouTube channels in Aragonese. And these proposals are very interesting, and I hope in the future, with more hours of Aragonese, we will get real speakers of the language.
Yeah, because these kind of more like lively materials will help that. But the main thing here is that the attitudes are so positive and they want more. That's really good. Sarah, Sarah Round, would you like to ask your question using your mic?
Yes, thank you. Muchas gracias para la presentación. It was really good. So I wanted just to ask, how useful did you find the data in terms of the analysis? Because it's very impressive that you essentially got metalinguistic comments from the students. And I just wondered whether there were also drawbacks to that, just because the children wouldn't understand what sort of answers you were looking for, perhaps. Were there questions you couldn't ask them for that reason? Just in general, how did that affect the data that you collected?
Okay, I think I need a translator. Maybe Lily can help me, because I couldn't understand all the questions.
¿Puedo explicar en español en vez de inglés si le ayudará? Entonces, es que mi pregunta es que si ¿cómo usaste un método que es muy difícil de explicar a los hijos por qué quieren esas respuestas, por qué tienen que, no sé, decir por qué les gustan las clases? ¿Cómo has superado esas dificultades? ¿Cómo has cambiado su comunicación con ellos o sus expectativas con el estudio? Sí, esa es mi pregunta. Perdón, no.
Okay, thank you very much. It was very, very easy, because in this this research is a part of my PhD. It was a very, very big research in the territory. So this is a little part of more studies that I did during some years. So I knew the children, and we had a confidence. So I proposed it like a game. It was presented like a game. You have this diary, you can write if you want. If you don't want to write, it's not necessary that you write the diary. In fact, I leave more diaries in more schools to more children, and they decided not to do it, and there was no problem. I tried not to influence them in their answers. The instructions were very simple. You have this diary, you can answer the questions I present. You can also write more reflections that you have. If you want to do after each Aragonese lesson, you can do it, but if you want not to do it after each Aragonese lesson, it's not necessary. And the most important thing was that they did it at home, not at school, because I didn't want that they were influenced by their mates or their teachers. So it was very easy, because I had a lot of contact with families and with teachers, with children, and it was presented in a very easy way for children.
Does that answer your question, Sarah?
Yes, that does. Thank you so much.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that they filled them in at home, because obviously at school you feel like, okay, I'm going to praise these classes, were so much fun, I'm here, but they actually still thought that when they got home that they were enjoyable. So that's really good. Radu is praising you in the chat. I think that's it. Well done, Iris. It was really interesting. And that was our last talk. And we ended on a very positive note. So I'm very happy, and I want to thank on behalf of the organizers for your attendance at this conference. There's one of the organizers. There we go. One thing I forgot to say is that the logo with the books that I didn't design it, but that was designed for this conference. It's James is behind that, or isn't that right?
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, there he is. So I just wanted to say that I really like it and hope you liked it too. So you'll probably see it again if you go to the website. We'll be in touch in sort of a week's time. So give us a few days to process the videos. If there's anything you don't want in the videos or something you've decided that you don't want it published, then get in touch. Is there any other announcements? Of course, our fundraising is still 85%. So I'm going to put it in the chat.
we'd like to get it up to 100%.
Yes.
Now.
Tonight, yeah.
Yes. Then champagne.
Then champagne. No, I actually just prosecco, but it's in the fridge. So I'm.
Thanks, Serena and Radu and Tobias and everyone for all the really nice comments. It's been such a delight. We've really enjoyed it. And yeah, like we said at the beginning, this was quite an experiment, and none of us, really knew exactly how it was going to happen. We'd never been to a virtual conference before. So thank you to all of you for making it such an enjoyable experience for us as organizers. We really had a great time, and we hope that you did too. Thanks.
Can I add a little word for this?
Yeah, of course.
On behalf of the executive committee of FEL, and there are a few here, as you can see, there's Christopher, there's Steven, there's Serena, and there's Tjerd, and myself. We would like to thank, of course, everybody who's participated. I'm not going to mention those who donated little things, but above all, Riitta and Lili, you have made a sort of a pioneering thing for us, actually. For FEL, this is the first time. And personally, I didn't expect it to be this good. I think I said that before. And it's beyond my own expectations, I think. And they can speak for themselves, those who are left here, Steven, Christopher, Tjerd, and Serena. But I think on behalf of everybody from the committee, I want to thank everyone who participated, made a donation, and organized it. And I hope to see you all soon in different things. And don't forget, next year is the 25th anniversary of FEL, and we're hoping to do something of a smash up, so to speak. And you're all invited, whatever we do, you're invited to contribute mostly. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you,
everyone, and good night, and we'll be in touch again soon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Of course, you have our email addresses, so please email us. We'll at some point probably put an auto response on the FEL email address and just have it redirected to our personal email addresses, because there seems to be less danger of things going to spam that way.
Yeah, we're so sorry those who are affected by that. It's very
By the spam crisis, yeah.
But the spam crisis won't happen again. We'll make sure.
So if
that.
you have any queries, we'll be in touch soon with updates and videos, but if you have any questions about anything, let us know. Oh, one more thing that we were thinking of doing, if people are happy to do it, is to put together an email list of all of the presenters and send that round to attendees. So we will email all of the presenters via EasyChair just to get their consent. And then once we've got that, we'll distribute that as well if you want to keep in touch with people afterwards.
Well, that's excellent. And also because I think some of us would like to ask specific presenters if they could give us the copies of the presentation.
The slides.
Yes, exactly, because we won't be able to distribute them, but yeah, they can do it. But yeah, we need the consent because of data protection laws, but we'll sort that out as well in a few days' time.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, and good night, or good afternoon, or good morning. And we'll see you all again soon.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.